Oh, okay. Well,
Steve Bannon, long an advisor to the president, one of his earliest public supporters, recently said that ICE should be deployed at the polls in the next election. Will you rule out the deployment of ICE or CBP to polling places this November?
There are no plans to have ICE officers at our polling locations. And
I'm glad to hear that, but would you rule it out? Would you say it will not happen?
do you plan on illegal aliens voting in our elections, Senator?
I do not. In
Okay,
fact,
then
the
there should be
Heritage
no need to,
Foundation,
unless you plan on illegal
Madam
aliens
Secretary,
voting.
the Heritage Foundation recently concluded that over a 20-year period where they reviewed hundreds of millions, billions of voting cases, they found only a small handful of actual cases of illegals voting. So I'm concerned by your rebuttal, which suggests you may be unfamiliar with 18 U.S.C. Section 592. Are you familiar with this federal statute that relates to sending armed men to polling places?
There are no plans to send any of our law enforcement officers to
But
polling
Madam
locations.
Secretary, you're
sir.
clear it would
There
be a
have been
federal
illegal
crime
aliens.
for you to do so.
There are illegal aliens that have voted, and it's been proven in the past in certain cases in certain states. We provide a program to states. I think we have 27 different states that utilize our SAVE program now to verify individuals that are eligible to vote in their elections. And as states run their election systems, we encourage them to use that to make sure they maintain their election integrity.
Madam Secretary, can you understand how when Steve Bannon says publicly, we should have ICE at the polls, and you say there are no plans, that's not enough to rule out the possibility of a violation of this long-standing federal law? Will you issue a directive that ICE and CBP should be nowhere near polling places this November?
We have no plans to have ICE officers or law enforcement at polling locations. States are responsible for running their elections, and we're giving them tools and mitigation efforts that they can utilize in order to make sure they maintain the integrity of those elections and that individuals can trust their systems to ensure that their vote counts.
Brand them as domestic terrorists. Can you explain why you decided to brand these victims that we all saw on video who were out protesting the activities of your agency and were killed as a result of it? How did you think that calling them domestic terrorists at that scene was somehow going to calm the situation?
You know, Senator, we are working in those situations where there's a tragic loss of life and that there is something that our agents are involved in, that we continue to deliver information.
Is it so hard to say you were wrong?
We continue, as these investigations continue to go, we will provide, I absolutely strive to provide factual information and will continue to do that.
And when you fail, do you admit it publicly?
Absolutely. We always know that there's room for improvement, that we will.
Could you explain this?
Sir, I'm looking at a picture of an interior, looks like a bedroom.
Of an airplane?
Yes, sir.
You're not familiar with that?
These photos are not accurate. If you're referring to the airplanes that the Department of Homeland Security has purchased and are purchasing, we're using them for long-range command and control aircraft that is dictated in statute by Congress for the Department of Homeland Security to have a plane.
Luxury jet with a bedroom in it?
Yeah, we used a 737. I've been on it once, but it is being used by other administration officials, and it is used for command and control flights for the department. The department has found that in purchasing our aircraft, that we will save the taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars.
Does it have a bedroom in it?
In fact, we spent $1.442 billion on ICE deportation flights last year.
Does it have a bedroom in it?
I believe it's being refurbished and not having a bedroom in it. So it is being refurbished.
What kind of deportee justifies being flown out of the country in a luxury jet with a bedroom and accommodations? like this?
There are aircraft being purchased that will be utilized for executive air travel and for deportations.
Well, your
If you
people
remember
said
in the
that this
past,
was
we
gonna
have
be
used
deportations.
jets of this size and this configuration for deportations in the past. If you remember
In this configuration, by this configuration, you mean
I
with a
didn't see
bedroom
the
and
inside of
luxury
them.
accommodations like this,
That
you've
plane-
used for deportations. Is that true?
Sir, we have 737s that are being purchased by the department to replace contracts that we have on ICE deportations. That's what they're going to be used for. And in fact, the Coast Guard is the only entity within the Department of Homeland Security that has jets at this point in time. They had two G5s that were 20 to 25 years old
Let me ask
that are
you
being
about
replaced
the
so that they can
response
continue to serve our
from
Coast Guard and our military
Some senior
for
administration
years to come.
officials about these aircraft. They've been reported as saying, although they don't want to say publicly this, but individuals described as senior administration officials have described these airplane purchases as the world's worst deal and an abuse of federal funds. Can you tell me what the Republicans on this committee who voted for what I call the billionaires bill that gave you the money to buy these jets knew about your plans to acquire luxury jets when they voted for that money?
The dollars for these airplanes was appropriated by Congress. In fact, it's mandated from Congress and rules that you've given us that we need to have a long-range command and control aircraft that will seat up to 17 people in the Department of Homeland Security for national security purposes. We are complying with the law. Those planes are being refurbished and will be utilized
we'll
for that,
see.
and they'll be
quick
utilized
questions
by
in my
members of
last
the
minute, if you don't
administration and
mind.
other components.
First,
They will also cut our costs, sir,
First, in my last
by
minute,
almost
if you don't mind,
40%. We are saving the
you-
taxpayer 40% by purchasing our own aircraft
May I
and
have a
operating
minute?
them rather than being susceptible to the contracts that they have today.
With the fact that you have spent $220 million running television advertisements that feature you prominently.
Sir, the president tasked me with getting the message out to the country and to other countries where we were seeing the invasion come from, with putting commercials out that told them that if they were in this country illegally, that they needed to leave, or we would detain them and remove them, and they'd not get the chance to come back to America the right way. That has been extremely effective.
Ask you to run these advertisements, is that right?
We had that conversation, yes, before I was put in this position and sworn in and confirmed, and since then as well.
Okay. Did you bid out those service contracts?
Yes, they did. They went out to a competitive bid, and career officials at the department chose who would do those advertising commercials.
And the people that you ended up picking were people who had formerly done your political work back in South Dakota, is that right?
No, that's not correct, sir.
I think it is.
No, it's not, sir. The individuals who, I believe the careers who they chose were two different media firms. There's been conversation about their subcontractors, but we have no legal authority to look into subcontractors on work like that.
Okay. And you're saying that you're testifying that President Trump approved this ahead of time? Is that my understanding?
We had conversations about making sure that we were telling people.
No, ma'am. I'm asking you, sorry to interrupt, but the president approved ahead of time you spending $220 million running TV ads across the country in which you are featured prominently.
Yes, sir. We went through the legal processes, did it
Did
correctly.
the president
worked
know
with
you were going to do
OMB.
this?
Yes,
He did?
yes.
Okay.
Does DHS, Madam Secretary, operate on any quotas or numerical targets for immigration arrests every day?
No, Senator, we do not. We do targeted law enforcement operations going after those worst of the worst criminals that are here
I would certainly
illegally.
prefer it if you did targeted operations against the worst of the worst. But just last year, Stephen Miller, who's the president's Homeland Security Advisor and Deputy Chief of Staff, went on Fox News and said, we're setting a goal, a minimum of 3,000 arrests for ICE every day. And President Trump is going to keep pushing to get that number higher and higher. He's the Deputy Chief of Staff and Homeland Security Advisor. and he oversees immigration policy for the president. What's your response to his public quote?
Sir, there is no quotas at the Department of Homeland Security. When we do law enforcement operations, we do them on targeted enforcement, getting public safety threats off of our streets and out of our communities to protect the American people.
Thank you.
In the last minute left, will you tell us the real implications of this shutdown on men and women that stepped up to serve our country in the highest way to keep our homeland safe and secure?
Yes, I'm grateful for our TSA law and security officers that are still showing up and doing their jobs, running those security checkpoints, even though they're not collecting a paycheck. A couple of the stories that I had heard when I spent time with them just in recent days was one individual whose wife needed cancer treatment, $1,200 treatment that he couldn't afford, and had to go and borrow money so she could get her cancer treatment because he wasn't getting his paycheck. Another individual who had 9 children was raising 2 of his grandchildren as well, that was struggling to pay his bills, took a nighttime job as a welder just to try to keep food on the table for the responsibilities that he had. These people joined TSA because of 9/11, because they want to be a part of keeping people safe in the United States and defending our homeland. Beyond that, FEMA, our ability to fund disaster response is virtually gone. It needs to be refunded. Our FEMA employees are out there doing work every single day, but we have 10,800 individuals that are funded out of the Disaster Relief Fund that could potentially not be there for them and not respond to individuals who need it when they have those terrible storms or devastating crises.
So what I want to know is, when are you going to get down to the original footprint as promised to us?
We're continuing to work at that, although those investigators will continue to stay there to get to the bottom of that fraud, to make sure that those vulnerable people that rely on those programs actually get services from those federal dollars that are spent, that it's not stolen by criminals and used by individuals to enrich themselves and send it out of the country.
Secretary Chung-Lee Tao, are you aware that agents bashed in the door of a U.S. citizen, a Hmong elder with no criminal record?
I can't speak to the specifics of that
case. Did you
case.
see the photos of that man being dragged out of his house in Crocs and in his underwear?
Yes, I did.
Do you believe that he was involved in fraud?
I do not know where that status of that investigation is.
Are you aware that he is a son of a beloved nurse that treated our soldiers in Vietnam?
I believe that we have laws in this country that need to be enforced and need to be applied equally to everyone.
Speaking of enforcing the laws and following the laws, did they have a judicial warrant when they rammed through an American citizen's door?
Our law enforcement officers follow the same protocols and procedures that all law enforcement do.
Are you aware that he tried to show his identification to show that he was an American citizen and they didn't want to see it?
Again, these officers conduct themselves in processes. If something was done inaccurately, then certainly we will make sure that we correct it and rectify it in the future.
Are you aware that the person they were looking for was in prison and had been in prison for years?
Yes, I am. That's a target. Yes, we do targeted operations going after and looking for.
Do you agree that it is unacceptable for your agents to ram into someone's door and drag someone out in their underwear and below 0 temperatures when they have the wrong guy?
Our officers conduct targeted operations and utilize the law processes that are given to them and the tools.
You will not answer that you think that's wrong.
They needed to identify that individual, and
they couldn't identify him by looking at his identification. Instead, they had to drag him out, throw him in a car, and drive him around for an hour. How about pulling off-duty police officers, Madam Secretary, every single one of whom made clear who they were? They were people of color, off-duty police officers. In Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, the chief described how one off-duty officer, someone of color, a U.S. citizen, was stopped and confronted by ICE agents with their guns drawn, demanding her proof of citizenship. As Chief Bruley said, I wish I could tell you that this was an isolated incident, but other chiefs said it had happened to their own officers.
So why am I disappointed with Secretary Noem? Because we're not going after enough people who did this damage at the expense of running numbers that Stephen Miller wants out of the White House. We just want numbers. We want 1,000 a day, 6,000 a day, 9,000 a day, because numbers matter, right? No, they don't matter. Quality matters, not quantity, quality. And what we've seen is a disaster. Under your leadership, Ms. Noem, a disaster. What we've seen is innocent people getting detained that turn out are American citizens. I could talk about the culture that's been created here with Stephen Miller aiding and abetting. I heard first reports that he was the one that said it was a domestic terrorist situation where 2 people lost their lives in Minneapolis. I've heard that report. Maybe you can refute it. I don't know that we'll have time for you to respond because I'm giving you a performance evaluation here. I'm not looking for a response. And I'm saying, Ms. Noem, that time after time after time I've been disappointed. But before I get back to looking at the vicious people that did this damage to these families, I want to talk a minute about FEMA. You have a policy right now that anything over $100,000 has to go through your desk for approval. I asked my staff, because I'm a management consultant, I don't try to do cheap shots in here, but the facts do not lie. This is your administration for FEMA response. This is President Trump's first administration. Which one would you like to have? If you're a state that has a $60 billion disaster, your biggest disaster in South Dakota that I can tell that when you were an elected official was about $500 million. So 1/100th of this single storm where thousands of people are hurting in North Carolina and you're just barely catching up. This is what competent FEMA leadership looks like. This is what incompetent FEMA leadership looks like. And people are hurting in Western North Carolina from the most significant storm they've ever experienced. This is what we need more of. I'm convinced you can't do it. If you're requesting a review of $100,000 and up, then it begs the question, why? Why would you be involved in that? Why would that be a policy? And in a minute, I'll ask about some people that are involved, some special government employees. Why are they involved in it? Thank you.
Senator,
no,
that
you can finish
that $100,000 only had to do.
And I will hold the clock until I finish.
Okay.
The bottom line is I've done the analysis. And you can say whatever you want to. I've worked with a Democrat governor. I've worked with a Republican governor. I've worked with fiscal research. We have people contacting my office now to get the information to better understand the failure of this department. You failed at FEMA. And in fact, if I get to it, actually, why don't I cover this right now? The Homeland Security Act of 2002 expressly prohibits the Secretary of Homeland Security from restricting or diverting FEMA resources from the agency's mission. Based on your disaster response, the chart that I just showed you, I have reason to believe that you're violating the law, either knowingly or unknowingly. So I'll be asking and getting a submission to the record, submitting a question for the record, what the total amount of FEMA reimbursements are currently being held by DHS, awaiting for final approval. Held by DHS, awaiting for final approval for an agency that you should not be obstructing the disbursement on. I'm going to give you time to answer to it under penalty of perjury so that we can get it right. Now, going back to Minneapolis, why can't we just say we made a mistake? I will ask you one question, if you can just give me a quick response. Who does Tom Homan work for? You or the president?
The president.
Okay. Why is that? Because I believe the president recognized that you weren't getting it done in Minneapolis, and you're putting us further away from pointing to this. We're beginning to get the American people to think that deporting people is wrong. It's the exact opposite. The way you're going about deporting them is wrong. The fact that you can't admit to a mistake, which looks like under investigation, is going to prove that Ms. Good and Mr. Petty probably should not have been shot in the face and in the back. Law enforcement needs to learn from that. You don't protect them by not looking after the facts. Not only should the FBI be investigating it, but every single law enforcement agency in that jurisdiction should be invited to it, so our law enforcement officers do not have this pall cast upon them. One of the reasons why ICE officers are having threats, and damn the people that threaten ICE officers, because so many of them are doing a good job, is because you've cast a pall on them by acting like we should investigate things differently. Officer-involved shootings have a formula that we should go through every time. And we're not going through that formula. As a matter of fact, in Ms. Good's case, I think that they were even saying that maybe there wasn't even a need to do it in the DOJ. I hope that that's changed. But I'm telling you, it was a civil rights review. I saw your frown. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But originally, Blanche said there wouldn't be an investigation. Folks, law enforcement, we've got to have their back. We've got to make it clear when they make a mistake, then they get corrected for it. But you don't walk away from it, and you've done it too many times. Now, Secretary, I read your book last week. And honestly, some of the parts of it impressed me, but some of it distresses me. And I'll give you a good example of one that does. The passage where you talk about killing a dog that was 14 months old. I train dogs, all right? And you are a farmer. You should know better. You should know that if you're going out to a hunting lodge and you're putting pheasants out and you're putting dogs out, you don't take a puppy out there. A 14-month-old dog is basically a teenager in dog years. You decided to kill that dog because you had not invested the appropriate time in training, and then you have the audacity to go into a book and say it's a leadership lesson about tough choices. It's in your book. We could play it if we had time. At that same lunch hour, you killed a goat. And you killed the goat because you said it was behaving badly. You are a farmer. You don't castrate a goat. They behave badly. You should have probably done that before. But my point is, those are bad decisions made in the heat of the moment, not unlike what happened up in Minneapolis. I expect we're an exceptional nation. And one of the reasons we're exceptional is we expect exceptional leadership. And you've demonstrated anything but that in the time that I've seen you responding to the emergency in North Carolina and across the Southeast, and acknowledging when mistakes are made, and speaking too soon for the expedient of social media or whatever it is. I'll leave you with this, Ms. Noem. I'm expecting answers to Charlotte's Web. I requested it a month ago. That was one of the investigations in Charlotte, 20 minutes from where I live. All I asked for, if it had to be anonymized, was information so that I could determine if your hit rate is right. I want to find more of those people, and I want to detain fewer of the others. And Mr. Chair, in my remaining time, I have a lot to go. But I want to submit this letter from the Office of Inspector General that cites 10 different instances under Ms. Noem's leadership where they've been misled and not allowed to pursue investigations that they think are critically important. Does anybody have any idea how bad it has to be for the OIG in this agency to come out and do this publicly? That is stonewalling, that's a failure of leadership, and that is why I've called for your resignation. And if I don't get an answer to these questions, I don't want an applause. Please don't do that for me. If I don't get an answer to these questions, if I don't get an answer that you've had a month to respond to, and the remaining ones, as of today, I'll be informing leadership that I'm putting a hold on any en-bloc nominations until I get a response. And in 2 weeks, if I don't get a response, I'm going to deny quorum and markup in as many committees as I can until I get a response. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Now it's Senator Booker's turn.